Welcome, puny humies, to another big talk. Me name is Grub, me leader of Orcs. Orc knows best. Okay, I'll stop. But I am super excited for this episode, and if you want to contribute to the WA, you can do so through the Patreon, my Fiverr page, and going through Lady Maeve's school for D&D shenanigans. Lady Maeve, tell me about the school.
Welcome, adventurers. Are you looking for a fun way to teach your kids to play D&D? Are you looking for games where your kids can play with other kids their own age? I teach D&D classes on a platform called OutSchool. We have games every day of the week, Monday through Friday, in all different time zones. For the adults in the audience, I have 2 games running currently on a platform called Start Play. Ages 13 and up can play on that site. Startide takes place on Sundays, and Waterdeep Dragon Heist will take place on Mondays. We are playing the Waterdeep Dragon Heist as a sandbox game, so the players will choose where we go and what kind of trouble we get into. I'll also be adding in one-shot games where you can pop in for one game at a time and check out my play style. Please click the links below in the podcast description for links to all of my games. I can run adventures and homebrew by request, and I hope everyone's ready for this wonderful world of orcs brought to you today by our imaginations.
Yes, imagination is the name of the game here. But another quote, me, Grimlock, love challenge. I don't know if you know who Grimlock is. He's actually one of the Transformers. He's one of the Dinobots.
I love Transformers. Bumblebee, the VW Bug was always my favorite. Mm-hmm. But my husband is a huge Transformer collector, and we have the Dinobots originals right now in the house, and Grimlock is good.
Yeah, if any Transformer was going to be an orc, it would be Grimlock. So we're talking, of course, about orcs, but not the orcs you're thinking of. We're thinking about my orcs. Now, orcs, they're big, they're green, they're ugly, and they love smacking things. But no matter what iteration of orcs we are talking about, they're awesome all across the board. And each variation of orc has some level of hilarity and horrific details to them that make them stand out. And for this case, my orcs are a combination of a lot of the classic orcs from like World of Warcraft, Lord of the Rings, a little bit of Warhammer, and some others just kind of thrown in there just for good measure. But on the cultural side, they have a very might makes right, fight with honor, die with honor mentality, and it's very Klingon-esque.
And for those history buffs out there in the audience, orc was originally Celtic for pig, which is why you see a lot of orcs either associated with pigs or boars, or they have pig-like features. Now, for those D&D players out there, something suspicious has been going on behind the scenes. Did you know that orcs have recently had a lore change with the new 2024 rule set? Gone are the descriptions of green skin hordes raiding your villages and burning down your town. Now, they're a noble group of wandering peoples who just love adventure. I think Grog got into the writing room and did some PR editing during the publishing of that book.
Isn't there something about like kobolds now that they're like running around burning down villages and all that, or is that just me?
Kobolds have changed in recent years from, an enemy you would fight in caves to these ridiculous, cute goofballs that run around causing shenanigans and silliness. Think Minions from the Minion movie, or Rabbids, if you've ever seen the Rabbids cartoons. In fact, in Icewind Dale, they even released a new kobold stat block. It's called 3 Kobolds in a Trench Coat. The lore is they dress up in these heavy winter coats because it's in the Arctic. And they'll go into town looking for food and things. And there's a whole cartoon series of, "Hello, fellow human. I am looking for food." There's another kobold, 3 kobolds in a trench coat. "Welcome, fellow human. We are also enjoying food. Where can we find this food?" And you find out the whole town is just 3 kobolds in a trench coat walking around looking for the tavern. Yes, kobolds have gone from being enemies to being these lovable, goofy sidekicks, and you can play as a kobold now.
Well, that's good. All right, so going to the origin of these orcs here. So these orcs were not created by, crossing goblins with humans, nor were they created by fusing demon blood with human flesh to give them that red skin appearance. They were created by the Spider Queen, Elissa, who is basically kind of her representatives because frankly she was kind of just lonely in her her little forest area, and relying on spiders as her messengers doesn't always work because
People do tend to scream and run away when a giant spider appears and begins talking to them. I'm reminded of the cartoon Billy and Mandy. Billy had this like giant spider that thought he was his dad. It's like, why won't you love me? And Billy's always hitting him in the head with sticks and things trying to get the giant spider to go away. So yeah, giant spiders or even small spiders as messengers tends not to work out very well.
I apologize to anybody who is arachnophobic that's listening because this is gonna get weird. But anyway, so she creates the orcs kind of sort of like children kind of thing. But nature has this weird thing about when new life is created, something weird happens. It's kind of like the first pancake in the pan. It's always going to turn out a little wonky no matter what you do. And these first generation of orcs, they were very wonky. They were very strange because when you think of orcs, you think, they're brutish, they're savage, and they just want to crump stuff. But in this case, they're somewhat more intelligent because these orcs, they're not stupid. Like, you can't be patronizing with them. But they decided they were going to get to know the other races and maybe try to get along with them. Unfortunately, our lovable tyrant, Beldrar the Mad, who is an elf, he was very hostile towards them, and he found the idea of the orcs settling in towns closest to the elven border, in his own words, quote-unquote, disgusting and a travesty upon life, and the idea that these abominations would choose to settle with humans, much less elves, is more than enough reason to exterminate them, which is what happened while he tried to do it.
So when you have a ruler named Beldar the Mad, you know they're going to be the most sane and stable individual in the world. It's the classic case of, oh, they're different, I must kill. So I see there's some character / plot development going on next.
Oh yeah. So Beldrar, on top of raising a red elf village, took to raising the village that was closest to the orcs that they were living in. And the orcs were kind of distraught by this because they were not the warrior culture yet. They're not passive, but they're more, that like, have you ever seen that episode of The Mandalorian where it's the 4th episode, I believe, where he goes to the village and he teaches them how to fight kind of thing?
Yes, they don't know how to fight yet, but once they learn how to fight, they're really good at it.
Yeah, basically something like that. And basically, so they fled north until they reached the Empire of Sumeria, and the Emperor, not the 40k Emperor, don't worry, we're not going to get into that, but the Emperor of Sumeria, he granted them basically a massive amount of territory and basically a peace charter that would basically last for 10 years. So after 10 years, they could, expand or, declare war or anything like that. So the orcs started building villages of their own, which eventually evolved into what is loosely described as a full-on town or full-on city.
SimCity Orc Pack, now available. Paint your buildings in various colors to make different things happen. So here we're going to get into the orc color scheme from 40k. In 40k, orcs have this belief system that if enough of them believe in something, it will happen. So anything painted red goes fast. Think like race cars. Blue is considered to be lucky. If you paint yourself blue, you're not going to get shot. Green is the bestest color because orcs are green. Yellow is associated with money and wealth, not because yellow is associated with gold, but because yellow is associated with yellow teeth, and they use teeth as money.
Teeth. Yeah, that's
teeth.
That's a funny thing because in order for an orc to get more teeth, they have to punch out another orc to get their teeth. It's hilarious. And don't even get me started on the squig thing. I'm not as versed in 40k lore, but squigs are a whole other thing. But yeah, so yellow is, I believe it's yellow that is lucky. It's one of the other ones is hits hardest, and then purple is the sneaky color. Now, do you know why it's the sneakiest color?
Has anyone ever seen a purple orc?
Nobody's ever seen a purple orc, and that's the best part. Now, there is a
All right. Oh, go ahead.
there is a misconception about the power of imagination. Now, in 40k, there's things called psychers, and they're basically tapped into the warp. The orcs are considered to be the most powerful, psychically powerful, but they're too stupid to realize it. At least these orcs in 40k, right where we are right now. Back then, they were called quarks, and they were bigger, and they were like meaner and stronger because they were basically created to fight the Necrons. However, in this case, they are really stupid because they don't fully realize it. But the conception is that if if a gaggle of orcs gets together and they believe something, then it'll happen. Basically, the idea of, and they scrap things together and think their machines don't work the way they're supposed to. Like, there's an example of where a guardsman they captured a Baneblade, which is a guardsman's vehicle. The guardsman went to go retake it. They opened the top of, and there's just a picture of where the engine should be, where it says vroom vroom. It's
they had the smartest orc write that down.
yeah, pretty much. Anyway, so the orcs at this time, when they were getting their civilization set up, civilization, the game is a lot of fun, by the way. I wish they would make an orc civilization, but not the point.
I love the Civilization series.
Anyway, so the orcs needed leaders, so they created tribes, and each tribe has a leader, but the king of the orcs, what they refer to as normally as a chieftain, would need to prove themselves to be not only the bigger and stronger orc, but the wisest. And the first official orc chieftain was a guy named Gorb, and it is said that he is the one who founded the orc warrior culture and rebuilt the orcs as a race and as a civilization, so that where they are now and how they follow things, basically.
So biggest, baddest orc is best orc. I do love the part where you're also throwing in, you have to be a good thinker. So maybe not only are we going to have a boxing match and a battle with blades, but now you have to play chess as well to become the leader of the orcs. This is a great adventure hook. Maybe the players have to get like help from the orcs, and then you have to figure out, okay, who's going to step into the fighting ring to fight the orcs to get what they need from the orc party, to get the orcs to listen to them. And this is a fun puzzle because the wizard of the party obviously can't step into that ring and punch somebody out. The barbarian might be able to, but how would a group of like non-fighter characters deal with this situation? Like, would the druid maybe turn into a bear and fight that way? So it gives your players a good puzzle to solve on how would you fight the orcs in a way that your group can get what they need from them, but also nobody dies.
That's also funny because when orcs greet each other, or when they greet other non-orcs, they will go up to them and headbutt them, and it is the funniest thing. And if you don't fall over from getting headbutted, it is considered a massive sign of respect, and you are basically like, you're treated like super importantly. That's how their culture works. So when an orc is born, their combat training starts almost right away. Like, as soon as they're like, maybe like a year in, because, babies don't quite understand what's going on, kind of thing. But the first weapon they are ever taught to use is a pebble. And then it goes from there. When they hit about 5 or 6 years old, they learn how to use sticks and are taught to respect their weapons. And also that when they, actually manage to kill someone, they give them, last rites and respect as a sign of respect itself. And the reason they don't teach their youngsters how to use bladed weapons right away is to instill this sense of respect for the non-bladed weapons, like the bow staff, the stick, anything like that, so that when they get around to the 16, 17, 18 mark, they can understand that a sword is more than just a weapon. It's a sharp tool that needs to be treated with care and respect.
Plus, toddlers with knives are completely terrifying.
Oh god, yes.
And the best weapons you can use in a situation are things you can find just lying around. If you're used to always using gun and you don't have gun, you're in trouble when a fight starts. But if you're used to picking up a rock and just throwing it at somebody, there's rocks all over the place. If you're playing D&D and you want to play an orc, you might want to pick up the Tavern Brawler feat. Tavern Brawler lets you use anything in the environment as a weapon. Even if you're just playing like fighter, barbarian, any race, any class, Tavern Brawler is a blast.
It's funny because orcs actually have a magical item called the satchel of random things, where they'll literally just go into it and they'll pull out something, and it'll be like, say, like a stick or an apple or a rubber ducky, and they'll just chuck it at somebody and it'll explode for some random reason. It's it's really strange. That's one of the funnier aspects of these orcs, but they don't generally bring that out unless they're absolutely desperate. And when you like, if like there's this one bit episode from a TV show I used to watch where the guy keeps throwing stuff at the guy as he's still coming, and then he throws a fish at him and he's like, "What? I ran out of stuff to throw." And it's like, well, what are you gonna do in that situation? You're of course you're gonna throw something that they wouldn't expect. Anyway, so the reason they train from such an early age is due to having the need to have warriors protect the village, and also, have a strong military. And no matter what path they take later in life, be it a shaman, a philosopher, a hunter, a teacher, or even, an archaeologist, yes, that does happen, orcs are always first and foremost a warrior. And when the chieftain calls for war, all orcs will rally and they'll get their assignments and all that.
Ah, yes, the famous orc, Indiana Bones. Uh, if you train your entire population to fight, then you can call up on a lot more defenders for your village, your town, your castle, than a population that's just trained 10 to 15 guardsmen, and all they do is guard. So the more of your population that can fight, the better chance you have of surviving an incursion of, let's say, giant zombie T-Rexes that are attacking from the woods. I love the zombie T-Rexes.
Oh god, yeah. They're actually like Night at the Museum, the T-Rex. That would be a good example of that, I think.
I have a fun one-shot called Treasures of the Savage Lord, where basically it's Night at the Museum. You're in a 2-story museum. The exhibits are coming to life at night. Nobody knows why. And you and your team need to go in there at night. You're getting paid to figure out what's causing all the shenanigans and stop it. And it is a lot of fun to play through. You've got bear skeletons you're fighting and some rugs of smothering that are coming to life in the textile exhibit. And I need to add a T-Rex in there. That would be a lot of fun.
Oh, you gotta add the Easter Island statue.
Gum gum for the dum dum. I love the Easter Island statue.
Yeah. So one of their battle rituals that they do is similar to something like the Maori Haka, which just imagine an orc sticking their tongue out at you instead of a kiwi. And they also paint their faces with like black, green, and red war paint, and they scream at the top of their lungs just before they charge into battle, and they're a lot of fun. So I'm gonna ask Lady Maeve to actually read a quote from somebody that describing the orc mindset from an outside perspective.
So this is a Runarian swordmaster in relation to the orcs. Of all the races that I have fought in war, the orc is the one I can truly say I am truly glad is not our enemy at the moment. Their code of honor and the way they conduct war is similar to ours, but to an outside observer, they seem like a culture of barbarity and savagery where the biggest orc runs the show. Yet having witnessed their prowess in battle, I can only hope that their enemy has the same sense to either surrender or flee before the battle begins.
Yep, and they're a lot of fun when they as kind of I alluded to before, 40k orcs are one of the few races in the 40k universe who are actually having fun when they go to war. It's kind of a similar situation here, except they're very Klingon-esque, but they're also a little bit of Mandalorian because they believe that conflict and battle develops them and makes them stronger on on the physical level as well as the cultural level, so that if they do get attacked, they can, defend themselves and they're not helpless. So I've been wanting to talk about this one for a bit. So let's talk about the orc women, because they're a whole separate thing. Orc women are, now you might think that orc women are, one notch kind of lower on the totem pole, but that is very far from the case. Orc women have a lot of pull when it comes to politics, and they're not just the ones that care for the children. They are the hunters. They're the night guards. They are the ones who actually go up and declare war. And gods help you if you actually insult an orc woman's mate, especially if she is royalty, because, for lack of a better phrase, let's just say you will receive the backhand of the century, which in orc culture means that they're challenging somebody to a duel, and sometimes it's to prove a point, but most of the time it is to the death.
There's a lot of cultures out there that got influenced by the British Victorian mindset that women are delicate flowers that must be protected at all costs. And they forget that women will fight to the death to defend their friends, their families, their pets. If you've ever seen a fight outside of a nightclub where two women are getting at it, pulling off each other's hair, scratching each other to pieces, nobody wants to step in the middle of that. Like, guys, they'll punch each other a few times and step back like, okay, dude, you win. Cool. We're cool now, bro. Ladies hold a grudge. And we fight dirty.
Oh God, yes. And the idea is it's similar to the women from ancient Sparta, where they're not just, the ones who take care of the children and all that. They are actually the last line of defense. I believe there's a quote from the movie where Leonidas talks to Xerxes and he makes a comment about the Spartan women, and he goes, "Clearly you don't know our women. I might as well march them up here and see how they do." It's similar to that, except orc women are fierce and they don't play nice. They are considered to be the best warriors among all the orcs, and they do have members in the military as captains or sergeants or lieutenants. And anytime an orc woman is present on the battlefield, it just raises morale to such a point where the orc men fight harder and win through sheer tenacity. And then the orc woman will say, "Hey, carry me back on my chair some 400 miles back to our capital," and the men don't question it. And the reason you don't see a lot of orc women fighting is because they either choose to be the last line of defense, and God forbid you get between an orc woman and her children. Basically, they make Ripley's whole thing with the Alien Queen, they make that look like child's play, because they do not like when you get between them and their children. It's very Mother Bear-esque kind of thing. It's not fun to see. Let's just put it that way.
It's a good rule of thumb of never get between a mom of any gender and her children or adopted children. And if I'm not sure if orcs are the same as humans, but humans also tend to pack bond with creatures like dogs, cats, horses, and inanimate objects like Roomba vacuum cleaners, Billy the Rock, Flashy the flashlight. And if you mess with either the kiddos, the pets, or the inanimate object that they have put a personality on, heaven help you. I mean, think about John Wick and his dog. You touch his dog, you are dead. Mm-hmm. You are dead to the world in pieces. But yeah, don't touch Rocky the Rock, or there will be consequences. And so yeah.
And as I said, like they're also the hunters. It's very like lion-esque too, because they're the female lions are actually the ones who hunt, which is an interesting take on that. Now I talked about orc mates, and it should be obvious here, but orcs mate for life, and divorce and affairs and all that nonsense is not in the vocabulary. They never even bother to look it up in the dictionary. In fact, they take the dictionary and just chuck it into a lake, basically. And often it is
dictionary good for step stool.
Yeah, pretty much.
Dictionary step stool. Make little orcs sit up taller at table.
Pretty much. Often it is the orc woman who chooses their mate, And once she's made up her mind, regardless if it's an orc or an elf or a human or even a dwarf or anything like that, nobody can challenge that decision. But if an orc male chooses, say, a human female as their mate, they often accommodate and treat the bride like absolute royalty. Like, they go full out with it. They'll give them a full makeover. They'll treat them with absolute respect. And she is often escorted everywhere she goes. And if somebody threatens her or tries to say, "Hey, call off the wedding," kind of thing, the orc in charge of their protection will just go up to them and bare their teeth, and that's enough to get people to back off. And orc weddings are really pretty and are a lot of fun, with lots of petals and a really big pig.
I love pig roast. Now, I kid you not, gentle listeners, there is now a line of orc romance novels out there in the world. I have not read them yet. I am very tempted to. There are things like Lady and the Orc and the Silver Fox, the Karen Keep. I mean, there's a whole line of these books. There's also more D&D themed monster romance books. Have any of our listeners read them yet? What do you think? I am tempted to get one and read through it. I know it's going to be probably... They're probably on the more racy side. That seems to be the theme now. But it is interesting. And just want to know if any of you out there in the listening area have read these. What do you think? Do you recommend them to other readers? Of course, please make sure you put your... it's probably going to be 18 plus because they are romance novels.
Obviously.
But yeah, that's new.
So, let's talk about orc religion here. So, orcs worship three things above everything: battle, spiders, and pigs. Their understanding of warfare goes beyond our comprehension, to such a point where often warriors from around the continent travel to the orc territory to learn how to be better fighters. And their sense of honor actually comes from the Runian swordmasters, and the orcs consider them to be distant cousins, and they're really they kind of give them like a massive bear hug anytime they see them. It's really awesome.
And again, the spiders, the pigs in battle. Spider pig does whatever spider pig can. From I think that was Family Guy. He had like a pig
Simpsons.
dressed up.
It was the Simpsons.
Simpsons, that's right. And of course, you got Peter Porker, the spider pig in the Marvel
God.
What If series.
Spider Ham.
Orcs with battle strategies sound very scary. 40k Warhammer orcs are fun in that you just point them in a direction and just get out of their way and let them run in that direction. Can you imagine if they actually had a strategy? I mean, they would just decimate the battlefield. They're fun because they're chaotic and goofy. Plus, in the 40k universe, orcs are considered a type of mushroom. So when they die, if you don't burn the corpses, they eventually respawn on that planet.
There's actually a funny story about how they have something called the Pain Boy, which is their medic. And now on the tabletop, if you roll a 1, you just screw up your surgery and kill an orc. But there's one time an orc actually had his head chopped off, and the Pain Boy just takes the head and just pops it back on and sews it back up, and the orc just gets right back up. It is so stupid but hilarious at the same time. Yeah. So they also worship the spider because they were created by a spider. Which I actually learned a while back that the drow, believe it or not, actually worship spiders too, but that's more of an official D&D lore thing, but I try to avoid stuff like that.
So in the D&D canon, the drow were considered a race of evildoers. They kept slaves, all that kind of stuff. They followed Loth, who's a spider goddess. If you mess up, she transforms you into this horrifying concoction of giant spider and drow, which is called a drider, which can be fun for your players to fight. They get 2 long swords or 2 long bows, and they have 8 legs. They're kind of like a centaur spider elf mix. With the Tasha's Cauldron of Everything being released, D&D kind of put into the lore set that any race can be any alignment you want. So you can have good drow, you can have chaotic drow, you can have evil drow still. If you want a fun spider-based adventure, if you're not arachnophobia, I recommend Out of the Abyss. It is a D&D game where you start as prisoners of the Drow with nothing. And it's the classic jailbreak. You got to break out, you got to scrounge materials to escape with, and you got to race to the surface.
Yeah, that does sound like a lot of fun. Yeah, the spiders in my world are very different. They're not intrinsically evil, but if you like say like you threaten the spiderlings, the little spiders, oh yeah, the big spiders will come out and they don't screw around. They do not. They're scary, and as somebody who is arachnophobic, like it gives me the willies. But and also, they just love pigs. The pig, as far as they're concerned, is everything to them. It's their pet. It's their mount. They ride into battle on giant boars. It also provides them with the essentials like pig skin for coats and food, and just they don't waste the pig. And they also kind of you have orc pig farmers, which is just a lot of fun because you just it's they kind of have they also have a like not a symbiotic, like an empathic connection with their pig. It's very like if you kill the pig, you're in trouble. Very John Wick-esque.
Yes. And for those of you, again, in Celtic, orc means pig, so they're related to pig. Well, not related to pigs, but, they're associated with the pig shape. Also, in Irish culture, pigs are called the gentleman who pays the rent because it is the one animal that you can keep on your farmstead and just feed it scraps from your table. It can forage in the woods. It doesn't cost a lot of money to feed. So a very poor family can raise a pig over the entire year, kill it at the blood moon in October, make it into pork chops, sausage, bacon, and all that, and then have the new piglets for the rest of the new year. So it was a very economical farm animal to keep at the time. So how big are these pigs they're riding on? Because I'm imagining these orcs are not tiny.
No, they're not.
Are they like the size of a horse? Are they bigger than that?
So that scene in what is it? Robin Hood. Uh, it's the Mel Brooks one. It's the Robin Hood Mel Brooks.
Men in Tights.
Men in Tights. Thank you. Yeah.
Men in Tights.
So
Yes,
Robin Hood,
I love that one.
Robin Hood goes to like Is it Rottingham? I believe it is.
Lord Rottingham.
So he enters the Great Hall with a big pig on his back. Well, that pig is for an orc would be like barely a mouthful. Like it'd be enough for like the little ones, but not enough for a bigger orc. And orcs are they're roughly big. They're bigger than a human. Let's just say that for scale reference. But
okay.
the boars and pigs that they hunt and tame are much bigger. We're talking like on the level like something like a potbelly pig or like a really big pig, and they just love their pigs for some reason. Then there's the orc shaman, which are basically just clerics by their standards. They're highly respected, and often they perform rituals to bless the troops before they march off to battle. They don't believe in the whole protection rune thing because they would rather have, like, die with a smile on their face or die, like, in honorable combat. And if they are going to get backstabbed or shot with magic, then that's how it is. So rather than, imbuing their weapons with protection runes, they bless them so that their gods will protect their souls should they die.
So the orcs of this world, do they have their own Patreon? What kind of gods or goddess would include? Definitely they'd have a war god, definitely a marriage god based on what we've already talked about. What do you think?
So they have Queen Elissa, which is the one who created them. They actually worship, I don't know if you're familiar with Conan the Barbarian, but they have
yes.
Crom.
Oh, I love Crom.
Crom is their war god, and they always ask for like blessings before battle. They don't do the whole if you don't listen then hell with you kind of thing. That's more Conan's thing, and I actually really appreciate that scene. Yeah, they also, they do have I guess Elissa would be kind of the one who would officiate or be like the one who blesses a wedding, but they do have like orcs who officiate. They sometimes will get people out of that are not orcs, like say Captain Barbossa to officiate. They're
I like Crom as a war god. He doesn't care if you pray to him or not. He's just there, you know? Blood for the blood god.
Yeah, corn. Um, so quickly, let's go over some quick weapons that I wanted to kind of throw out there. This right here is actually the standard orc sword. It is. I didn't want to make a hockey stick like the orcs have, so I kind of made this. It almost looks like a buster sword, but to an orc, that's a long sword. It is a lot of fun. Um, they have their orc battle axes, which to an orc, this is like your most sacred weapon. It is pretty much something that you almost always carry into battle. And the chieftain, his name is Eritrok. He actually has his own sword, which, thanks to our lovable dwarf George, he was the one who created it. And this is his. You could call it a cleaver, you could call it a scimitar or a falchion. He considers it a cleaver, basically. So,
And slight spoiler alert for our listeners out there. I believe Victoria is going to run into some orcs eventually, which is why we wanted to cover orcs today.
at some point, yeah, you're gonna have that, but no, that's all we're gonna spoil for that.
Yeah,
So
that's it. No plot drips.
so let's actually talk about my Uruks, not the Lord of the Rings Uruks, but these are my Uruks. But so about 200 years ago, a group of orcs were kind of tired of the status quo and didn't want one orc to rule over them, and they called the orc chieftain, quote, a pacifist war-hating dum-dum, and they were immediately banished for this. So they traveled across the sea to the dark lands of Un, which is basically the Mordor of this world, if you will, where they met the master of Un, a person called the One. And no, it's not Neo.
So with this group saying that they didn't want one ruler overall, do they use a council? Do they have like a trio that rules them? How do they do their leadership if they don't want just one overall?
Well, this is kind of the irony is that they believe that the biggest orc and the strongest orc is the one who should rule them, but also the one who loves war. So, and also just the one who is like asserts his authority and basically like looks like meat's back on the menu, boys, and whoever like basically that basically kind of that thing.
Okay.
So the one said, "Hey, I got lots of land for you to live on, and if you want war, you could just conquer these areas for me, and you'll have more war and more taste of man flesh than you'll know what to do with." So over the decades, that original group of about 100 orcs expanded via, crossing demonic blood and flesh with goblins and men into what will become the first generation of a new breed of super orcs. And for the sake of simplicity, I refer to them as Uruks or Urukai.
So we've got the uber war orcs that are just becoming bigger and better war machines. Plus we've got the one guy who is just like, hey, a free army. Let them clear out some badlands for me, and then I don't have to pay my army to do it.
Looks like meat's back on
Free
our menu, boys.
meat's back on the menu.
I love that. I love that whole scene. That is just and it's funny that when we bring that up. I think my Uruks are a lot better than the Lord of the Rings orcs and Uruks by extension, because in my opinion, because what people don't know or don't really understand or probably haven't read the books, and get ready for this. So in the books and films, Saruman attacks Rohan with 10,000 orcs at Helm's Deep. That's fine. Sauron's forces, when they attack Minas Tirith. In the film, it's widely believed that it's about 200,000. In the book, it's well over that number, about 300,000, between the Haradrim and the Corsairs from Umbar and the Easterlings, and on top of all the orcs. So that's about 300,000. The number that's in the Darklands of Un, considering almost 100 years of creation, we're talking at least 5 million. And they are currently building a massive sea bridge to invade the first continent, which the ocean is at least 700 miles long at minimum.
Building things is a great way to keep your army occupied and out of trouble between battles. Um, so the place they're building the sea bridge to, do they have warning that these orcs are on the way? Or is it going to be a complete surprise when it gets close?
It's going to be an absolute surprise, but also, well, the one is considered to be omniscient, so he'll probably overextend and basically declare war, and it'll be a complete surprise. But for the most part, once they do get warning, I guess the Taurians could try to destroy the sea bridge, but it would be kind of difficult because orc battle cruisers and orc ships, just that kind of thing. Yeah. So we're going to end off this episode with a couple of funny stories before we, get going. But the first one I want to talk about, I've told this story a bunch of times, but I wanted to kind of tell it again. So at one time before the orcs broke off and all the orcs and all that, the orcs did wage war against the Taurians. They were trying to conquer this little outpost that sits on the Taurian and Sumerian border. No idea why, but that's kind of what they wanted to do. They kind of wanted to use it as kind of like a staging area, I think. This plays pretty close to the Battle of Helm's Deep, except there's no explosions because orcs do not know how to make things go boom, basically.
Once orcs figure out how boom works, that is a whole different war. It adds a new fun thing. The 40k orcs blow things up all the time. They don't understand how it works. They just paint it yellow and then it will explode. And then for those out there playing D&D, dynamite has been added to the DM's guide. So now DMs no longer have to do those calculations manually. And there's also a few items in the siege engine area of the DM's guide that my players are labeling war crimes. Use in your games at your own discretion, DMs. Luckily, it's in the DM's guide, so most players won't see that section unless they buy their own copy. But if anybody wants to know more about the war crimes section of the DM's guide, the new weapons, the new siege items they've brought out, just let us know, and we can possibly do a future episode on all the new armaments and castle-breaking materials.
So the orcs, they start doing their war chant until one of their crossbowmen accidentally fires up onto the wall and accidentally hits somebody. This is kind of the inverse of what happens in the Battle of Helm's Deep. For the 40k fans out there, let's just say he rolled a 5. We'll just go with that. So the orc commander, he stops the war chant, goes over to that orc that shot his crossbow, and he cuts the orc's head off. And the humans are really confused by this. Absolutely.
Well, obviously he dissed the leader by doing combat before the performance ends. Performance first, then battle, Steve. Get it right.
So the battle eventually, it kind of plays out similar to the Battle of Helm's Deep with no boom, but they do get to the main gate. And one of the orcs thrusts a spear into the human commander's shoulder. The commander rips out the spear and shoves it into the orc's face, and he goes to get his wound looked at. And the battle continues until the sun peaks over the hill. No horses, no Rohirrim.
Darn it! I love the Rohirrim.
The orc commander calls off his forces and he offers a truce. He tells the commander that, hey, we'll tend to your wounded, we'll give them last rites, we'll even sing them lullabies, because orcs love to do that for some reason. And then afterwards, we'll have a big feast. And that's exactly what happens. And the humans and orcs, they actually tell funny stories, and they actually get along after this battle. It was more like, what the hell are you guys doing? Like, why did you guys attack us? It's like, hey, let's have this big feast and celebrate our new friends.
The classic punch each other into the face until we're friends move.
Pretty much, yeah. And so then finally, probably everybody who knows this story at some point next to Bricky, but I'll kind of tell it. But there's a story from 40k. To understand this, we've kind of already explained the power of imagination thing, so I'll just go into it. So a contingent of guardsmen are defending a point from the orcs, and he just keep coming until the guardsmen run out of ammo for their guns. So the company commander says, I have an idea. He goes on top of the hill, he points his gun at the orcs, and he goes, bang! and the orc falls over dead. And the other guardsmen kind of look at each other, and then they go bang, 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 until another group of orcs come charging over the hill, and they're not falling over from all the banging. And the guardsmen hear chanting, and as the orcs get closer, they hear, I'm a tank, I'm a tank, I'm a tank, I'm a tank.
I'm a tank, I'm a tank, I'm a tank, I'm a tank. And they're carrying one on top, and he's supposed to be the gun. Luckily for guardsmen, the power of belief does not work for guardsmen. So when he says boom, the guardsmen don't fall over from the imaginary artillery shell. I love playing against orcs in 40k. I usually field Tyranids on the field of battle, so everything's just food for the bugs. But the orc players always have such fun models and army themes. Anything goes in an orc army. I believe you were saying earlier someone modded up a fire truck.
Oh yeah,
and put it on the field.
Yeah, there's a lot of like conversion. Like you could take like an army or a fire truck, or even like somebody did a Gravedigger with a monster truck, just slap a bunch of orc stuff on it. You got yourself a battle wagon, and they have so many weird things like the shock attack dragstas, the Burnabombas, which are just basically planes, and if you roll one, the plane just kamikazes into something. Orcs are really, at least in 40k, they're really stupid, and they love war, and they just love crumping things. They have this very big, dumb, stereotypical British accent because GW was based in Britain. I think that's the...
They're based out of England, yes.
That's what I thought, yeah. And it's like, yep. Only a Brit could come up with something stupid like that, and it is absolutely hilarious. And
one of my favorite orc armies I fought against, they were all not green. They were all pink. Someone had painted bathing suits on all of them. And I'm in Florida, the state of Florida, so it was a South Beach, Miami army. So they had beach balls instead of bombs. They had like sand on their bases. They were wearing It was hilarious. But yeah, the orc army is always fun to look at. They have the coolest models, I must say. The most fun and entertaining ones. We talked about squigs earlier.
Oh yeah, squigs, yeah. But their models, they're actually a lot older because they're one of the older armies. But they have been getting a lot more newer models, like squig boys. And yeah, I was talking about squigs. Squigs are basically kind of similar to like orc pigs in this universe. But the squig is really interesting because they field a bunch of roles. Like you've got bomber squigs, you've got bullet squigs, you got hair squigs, you got all kinds of squigs. They're a lot of fun. Again, orcs are stupid, and you can't help but laugh at it.
The best way to describe a squig is one of those really big toys that is that bouncy ball that you sit on, and there's a handle on top, and you hop up and down on it. It's like that with legs and a shark mouth.
Yeah, pretty much.
And the orcs just bounce into battle on these things. They are hilarious. They have 2 legs. They're a big round ball with teeth, and they are, as we say, more dumb than orc. So they're a good match for the orcs.
And actually, I would kind of describe them almost like Mike Wazowski a little bit.
Chain chomps from Mario.
Yeah.
Chain chomps are very similar.
Oh, yeah, that's true, yeah. Anyway, so that's the episode. What are your thoughts on this whole thing before we wrap up? Because we've been talking about 40k orcs a lot, but...
I know. I love the lore that we have for the world. Orcs have been around for... They're folklore creatures, like, trolls and vampires and things. So they've been around in culture, in many different cultures for a long time. So there are so many different flavors of orc you can play. You can play it as a full orc in D&D now. You can play as a half orc if you're doing the 2014 rules. 40k you can play orcs. So orcs are a really fun creature, character, person to play. And do you guys play orcs in your games? Let us know.
So next time we're going to be talking about Canadians. A bit of personal pride here, but we will see you guys next time. And Happy New Year, by the way. We forgot to bring that up.
Happy New Year! Happy adventuring, everyone. We will see you on the flip side.